So thank you for joining us here at the Crow's Nest. This is a collaborative event with the Royal Canadian Navy and the association, ACADA, in advance of MASS, the Maritime Arctic Security and Safety Conference that we're hosting this week. So in the spirit of being in this fantastic facility, we felt we wanted to bring Margaret Morris here to give an overview of a little bit of the history of the Crow's Nest. And Margaret is a retired Navy officer, as well as plays a very significant role for the non-for-profit organization for the Crow's Nest. We'll talk a little bit about that at the end, because I want all you guys to really step up and help with what they're trying to maintain and keep it alive here. So over to Margaret.
Okay,
we look forward to hearing this.
And welcome to the Crow's Nest for all those both from here and away. This is a very, very special room. A lot of fine young officers had their last bit of fun in life, their last bit of joy in this room. They returned to their ships. Their ships returned to the Battle of the Atlantic. Some of those ships never made their destination. Some of those officers never got home. So I hope that's not the case for anyone here this evening. I hope each and every one of you enjoys your time at the club and gets home safely. The World War II, the Newfoundland Escort Force set up in St. John's in the summer of 1941. It was Captain Rollo Mingy, senior naval officer in the wartime port, ahead of his time in so many ways. And he understood the importance of personal relationships. And he said if the convoy system is going to be efficient, effective, successful, the officers have to get to know each other. They have to have trust and confidence in each other. They needed a venue to foster that relationship. So this room was the loft of a warehouse. It was made available for a token rent, $1 a year, that sort of thing. And the club opened in January 1942. Everyone gets a chuckle out of the excerpt from the club's first constitution up on the beam there. Legend of the Crow's Nest, the Constitution specified no women were allowed in the hallowed confines, later relaxed for one evening a week. With the curt memorandum, it is hoped they will not clutter up the bar. But it was more than women that weren't allowed. This club opened up as the Seagoing Officers Club because it included the merchant officers, but it didn't include all naval officers. So if you were a logistics officer, legal officer, finance officer up on the base, wearing a naval uniform, driving your desk, this is not your club. Medical officer at the base hospital, this is not your club. Medical officer going to sea, this is your club. So that meant these guys could talk shop all day, all night, didn't have to worry about boring their guests, didn't have to explain their challenges, their working environment to outsiders. Also, I think Mingy had an early appreciation of post-traumatic stress. And I think he understood the importance of a safe, secure room where these fellows could speak freely, unguardedly, didn't have to put on a brave face for outsiders and that sort of thing. So, like I said, the club opened January 42. Again, this room was the loft of a warehouse. The walls were bare. Fellows started scratching the name of their ship into the deckhead and bulkhead, to use nautical terms. Captain Mingy didn't want graffiti in the Crow's Nest. The room was kind of rough as it was. He didn't want it to spiral into something really rough. But again, a great understanding of people. He realized you may as well accept human nature as try and change it. People want to leave their mark. So that's when he said, okay, no more graffiti, that's done. Instead, each ship is given a portion of wall space to leave their mark. So this is where all this artwork started. The first one given to the club, HMCS Wetaskiwin up here, that was a corvette. It was named for a small community just south of Edmonton. It's a First Nations name. A lot of people have trouble pronouncing it. It was known as the Wet-Ass Queen. So Queen sitting on a lump of ice, sliding along there in a puddle of water. And they didn't have that painted up for the Crow's Nest. They had that painted up prior to this club even opening. It was hanging in the wardroom when the opportunity came along to have something represent the ship. They knew exactly what to contribute. That came out of the wardroom, got brought in here. They didn't put it on the wall right away. They just set her down, probably had a round of drinks to congratulate themselves. That's what I'd do. The officers from Trillium were on hand when this got delivered. They decided they wanted to get on the wall right quick here. Legend has it they left their beer on the table, raced back to the ship, come back the next day, paint still wet and tacky, and actually put this on the wall. So Wetaskiwin has the distinction of being the first bit of artwork given to the club. Trillium has the double distinction of being the first piece painted specifically for the club and actually put on the wall. And things filled up from there. But these first two really set the tone for everything that followed. They're upbeat, they're colorful, and even though it was a dark time in history, a dark time in the war, in 1942, things were not going well at all. Anyway, these are all a play on the name of the ship, a play on the name of the captain, or some episode in the ship's service history. Dianthus there was a Royal Navy corvette. It was responsible for the loss of 2 U-boats. One of them they got by conventional warfare of the day with depth charges and that. The other one they got by ramming. The World War II crews loved ramming. They considered it a weapon they could use with some precision. If you threw over depth charges, you had to estimate at what depth the U-boat was at, set your depth charge accordingly. If the numbers don't match up, you make a big splash with no real effect in the end. But when you rammed them, you knew exactly how much damage you'd done. Equally important, if you rammed a U-boat, you probably did damage to your own ship. Repair yard, time ashore. We're out of this for a while. Skeena up there, top left, a river-class frigate. So the ship is represented by the salmon there, giving the winking at the U-boat there, flirting with her. They got the depth charge wrapped up in the fin there, ready to drop, just luring her into position, and a fatal encounter is imminent. Burwell was one of the 50 ships that the Americans made available in the Bases for Destroyers deal. The Americans built a lot of ships for World War I that saw little or no service, and they were put into long-term reserve. When World War II rolled around, Roosevelt made 50 of them available in exchange for long-term leases for military bases on British territories. That's when we got a whole string of military bases here in Newfoundland. Burwell was probably in reserve just a little too long. It was famous for always breaking down. And I read an account from one fellow who served in her, and he said the only time they fired their gun, the lights went out, the cockroaches went crazy, and they sprung leaks everywhere. But that same fellow also referred to it as the luckiest ship afloat, as it did survive the war, as did he. So similar stories with all of these. Sally over there is a good one, HMCS Saint Laurent, named for the St. Lawrence River. That image is not the figment of anyone's imagination. It's based on Sally Rand, who was a famous exotic dancer in the 1930s, who apparently did amazing things with ostrich feathers. So she's winning the war there all on her own. And we have an out-of-town member who lives in California and knows Sally Rand's grandson and has shared that image with her grandson. And would never pass muster in today's Navy, I'm sure, but it was okay in 1942, so it's okay today. Just around the corner from Sally is HMCS Dauphin, has a Mountie riding a U-boat like a sub. The captain of Dauphin had been RCMP Marine Division prior to the war. With the outbreak of World War II, the natural transition was to join the Navy. One of our best stories is Broadway up there. If you don't know the backstory, you think it's just a little sailor boy gone fishing. But in fact, Broadway and Bulldog, 2 British destroyers, were responsible for getting the first complete Enigma machine. That could be a book, a movie in itself. And so if you know the backstory, it's not just a silly little cartoon sailor boy. He's got a big grin on his face. He's very pleased with himself, and so he should be. And he's got the U-boat in the fishbowl there, so it's contained. They got the good parts. It's not a threat anymore. Over in the corner, we have behind the banner there, is the periscope from the U-190. The last Canadian warship sunk in World War II was HMCS Esquimalt. It was sunk in mid-April 1945 by the U-190. And 3 weeks later, victory in Europe was declared. By then, the U-190 was off the south coast of Newfoundland. They were ordered to surface, dump their ammo, and report to the Canadian Navy. They complied with all that. The Canadian Navy directed them around to Bay Bulls, small community just south of a half-hour south of here. And the German crew were taken off. An Allied crew brought the U-190 into St. John's and then on to Halifax. And it was commissioned in the Canadian Navy as HMCS U-190 for 2 years. And we have a pennant from that time in the cabinet behind there. So I'll just finish up there. I know I have limited time, and the whole spirit of this room is people getting to know each other. So in the same way that Mingy had an idea of the escort force officers getting to know each other, I'm sure there's relationships being built here this evening, and me yakking on too long isn't helping them. But I will just finish off with one comment, though. I think the Canadian contribution to World War II is really undervalued, under-recognized, underappreciated. We had 1 million people in uniform for World War II, and our population at the time was only about 13 million. And the Navy comprised about 100,000 of that. So all these, and largely a volunteer effort. Conscription was brought in, but not till quite late in the war. The worst was over by then. So you think of all these young men and some young women leave the farm, leave the factory, leave school, take compressed training, and sent off to fight a war, learning by the seat of their pants. So there's one good story about Canadian corvettes taking a convoy across the Atlantic. They're doing evasive steering to avoid U-boats, zigzagging. So a junior ship makes a sloppy maneuver. They zig when they should have zagged, or they zagged too far, something like this. Senior ship is not happy, wants to get on the radio to express his displeasure, can't do that, might give away their position. Radio direction finding equipment is just being developed. So he gets on the flashing light, gets a signalman probably on the flashing light, dits and dahs one letter at a time in Morse code, senior ship to junior ship, what the hell are you doing? Junior ship dits and dahs back one letter at a time in Morse code, mostly learning, which is the perfect answer. Anyways, I hope you're all mostly learning tonight.
Thank you, Margaret.
Okay.
Margaret's going to be with us.